Namaste and welcome to the Transformation Immersion December 2020 Mega Series, where you are getting to meet various holistic wellness experts and coaches to help you bring the desired changes that you have been longing for years. I am your host, Sonal Singhal, a techie turned holistic healer and transformational coach. Weight loss is one such a topic which you will find most of us struggle with at some point of our lives. We all want to look perfect in our outfits and even make efforts either by means of exercises or modifying our diet. However, when we are stressed, we often find our sincere attempts going vain. So, to educate us how stress is stopping us from losing weight today, I have with me Cassie Christopher. Cassie is a registered dietitian and supports women of age group 40 to 60 to get a handle on emotional eating and inability to lose weight by addressing the real root of their food issues. So be ready with open ears to get the expert advice from Cassie. Welcome, Cassie, to the Transformation Immersion.
Yes, thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here and talking to all of these women who care so much about their health. And men, I know you're all out there.
So, Cassie, I noted that you yourself faced weight issues due to stress when you were in grad school, being
Yeah.
a student of Masters in Nutrition. So, what were your feelings at that time about weight and how you conquered your emotional eating?
Yeah, I think understanding where I come from is really helpful in seeing what I talk about now. Because for me, I was getting my master's degree in nutrition and had this frustration because I saw that the way I was coping with the stress of that period in my life, it was one of those things that was oddly stressful. You wouldn't think to become a dietitian, there'd be so much stress, but it was like 50 students and only 25 got to become dietitians. So I, being a perfectionist and that type A type personality, want to be the best and show what I can really do. I put a lot of stress on myself.
Mhm.
And in order to cope with that, the only way I really knew how to cope with stress, the only tool that I had for the difficult emotions I was facing was chocolate, quite honestly, and emotional eating, using food to comfort myself. And imagine in such a pressure cooker of a situation, over the course of 2 years, as I was learning the right foods to eat and the way to be healthy, I was simultaneously gaining over 20 pounds
Mhm.
with this little chocolate bar a day, keeps the doctor away habit, although it really doesn't, because I was feeling awful. Honestly, I had no energy. I was so frustrated with myself because, I had the textbook. I knew exactly how I needed to be eating and what I needed to be doing. And yet nothing I was learning taught me how to handle that emotional component. And so I did all the things I was taught to do. I did the restrictive calorie counting. I tried low carb. I tried elimination diets, and all of those things seemed to just make that drive to eat, particularly at night, after dinner when you just need a little something, it made it way worse.
Mhm.
So none of it seemed to work. And I felt like a fraud. I was embarrassed. I was clueless as to what to do about it. So it wasn't until I graduated and was interning in an outpatient diabetes clinic that I started to notice a connection between balanced blood sugar during the day and less emotional eating at night for both myself and my patients. So some things started to click for me. And furthermore, I also started to see that those people who had lots of stress in their lives were less successful with weight loss and chronic disease management, like, maybe dealing with diabetes, high blood pressure, heart disease. So I began to research, why is this? And I found that the stress hormone cortisol may be at the root, and I began to understand its impact on health, weight, and emotional eating. And using that information, I was able to finally, after several years of searching, lose the weight that I had put on in grad school, heal my emotional eating. And I found that these same strategies that worked for me were useful for my clients. And so I then took those techniques and created the Stressless Weight Loss Mastery, where I have a lifestyle and mindset formula for women, like you said, in their 40s through 60s, to balance stress hormones, make peace with emotional eating, and shed unwanted weight for good. And so that's where I am today.
So, we are talking about emotional eating a lot, but what it is?
That's
What
a
is
great
emotional eating?
question. Yeah, that's a really great question. And essentially, emotional eating is eating, whether it be eating an eating instance, like you're hungry at all and you choose to eat even though you're not hungry, or maybe emotional eating can also be what you choose to eat when you are hungry, or the portions that you eat. So emotional eating at its core is really, you're eating when you're hungry is one thing, and eating emotionally is another. And it can really be spurred by so many things, I really make the case that high levels of the stress hormone cortisol cause actually a lot of emotional eating. And what I see is women blame it on poor willpower and poor self-control and poor self-discipline, when really there's a hormone imbalance going on.
So, are there any other possible factors other than stress behind emotional eating?
Certainly. I mean, emotional eating can be influenced by, boredom. It can be influenced by happy things even. So, celebrations like at holidays, actually, when you're eating with your family, if you eat a little bit more because, you're savoring the moment, that's actually a form of emotional eating. And, of course, habits get in there, and comforting yourself if you're feeling any sort of way that you need comforted. Essentially, when you don't have the ability to balance those hormones and then also process through your own emotions and sit with uncomfortable emotions, what I find is people usually are using eating to numb or avoid feeling things. And the reason they use eating is because it works. Actually, when you eat, especially, we're never emotionally eating carrots, right? When you're eating these foods like, the sweets or the fatty foods or whatever,
Salty food.
yeah, exactly. It hits a little dopamine neurotransmitter in your brain, and that is a reward pathway in your brain. So you eat and you feel rewarded, and it helps you feel better. So I bring that up to say, emotional eating isn't only for hard or difficult emotions. We sometimes feel it in positive emotions too, and it's not only related to it serves a purpose, I guess, is the point I'm trying to make, in that it is a coping method that works. And it's a short-term work. It doesn't help you in the long term in terms of reaching your goals or helping you feel better or healthy or whatever. But I think it's important to recognize it works, and especially for people who are trying to use the willpower or the self-discipline or the self-control, often they don't add in another coping mechanism. So it's like they cut themselves off cold turkey from their emotional management and expect to have success. No, you're not going to have success. And I hope that makes sense.
So, how do you reduce the cortisol levels? And how do
Yeah,
you know? And how do you know that that is the culprit? It's just. I mean, because you are saying that cortisol hormone is responsible. If you have excess of it, are there any other possible reasons? And and how to reduce the cortisol level?
Sure. So, I want to say yes. The stress eating or emotional eating in general, it's multifactorial. For like I said, the emotions that you haven't worked through can impact. There are other appetite hormones that can impact as well, and even blood sugar balance. So there's other hormones involved, and certainly there can be underlying medical conditions that might make somebody like a hypothyroid or something that might also contribute to some of these same symptoms. But the interesting thing is when you treat the cortisol imbalance with diet and lifestyle. So I'm not talking about medication when I say treat, or even taking a handful of supplements or something. When you treat with diet and lifestyle, the cortisol imbalance, it has positive impacts in all of these other areas. Now, if there's an underlying medical condition, that obviously needs to be treated, by someone's doctor. I don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that this is the new magic bullet. But even still, something like a hypothyroid, research shows that people with hypothyroid have increased levels of the stress hormone cortisol inside of their body. So that speaks to that question about, can there be other factors? So I hope I answered that. And I also want to speak to, how do you balance cortisol? So first, I think you have to understand what is cortisol and how is it really impacting health, to get to the bottom of then how do you actually manage it. So cortisol is the primary stress hormone in the body, and there are a lot of hormones and a lot of stress hormones, but it's the primary one. And here's the thing, you can't survive without it. It regulates sleep, it regulates blood sugar balance, it's responsible for that fight, flight, or freeze reaction that you have when something scary happens or stressful happens. And it's not a bad thing. It's important to know, but it's not a bad thing to have cortisol, right? But our modern stressful lives mean that many of us have more cortisol moving through our body than we need, and that starts to negatively impact our health. And you might know if your cortisol levels are high if you are feeling exhausted, if you have trouble sleeping, if you're feeling stressed or overwhelmed all the time, if you have low energy. And from that list, you might say, oh, well, that also sounds like how someone, like I said, with hypothyroid might feel, or some other conditions. And I would say, most people come to me and say, yes, I feel this way. My doctor has ruled out anything else going on, or I'm being treated for these other things and I'm still feeling this way. So really that is telling me that cortisol could be an issue, and it may be that it's chronically high, or what you can start to have happen is cortisol is too low, that you don't actually have enough because it's been chronically high for so long. Because our lives honestly are just really stressful, especially for, ambitious, driven women who also want everything else that life has for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so you mean to say that having low cortisol level is also problematic, so it should be balanced.
That's exactly right. Because like I said, you need cortisol to regulate your sleep-wake cycle, and to regulate your blood sugar balance, and to regulate your immune system. I mean, you really need it for so many things. But it's a problem, and I'm sure in just naming those things that cortisol is involved with, it's a problem when there's not enough or there's too much. And I think most of the research is really done on too much cortisol. For instance, there's a lot of research about all the things that too much stress in your life can negatively impact, and in particular, high levels of the stress hormone cortisol have been shown to lead to chronic conditions like diabetes, insulin resistance, heart disease, cancer, and exactly like we've been talking about, weight gain.
So
I go
yeah,
for it.
please go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I'd love to tell you a little bit more about the weight aspect, if that's something that you think would be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. So it's important to know that cortisol keeps you in fat storage mode rather than fat burning mode.
Mm-hmm.
And that it can also cause food cravings and it moves weight to your belly. And I'll talk a little bit about each one of these 3 points in a moment. But this is the essential mechanism by which cortisol impacts your weight.
Mm-hmm.
And I apologize that I've got these dings going on.
It's okay.
So fat storage is impacted when blood sugar dips too low from not eating regularly, say you're on a restrictive diet, or after a blood sugar spike from high sugar or refined carb meals alone.
Mm-hmm.
And it causes the hormone insulin to be released. And you're probably aware of the hormone insulin, talked about more around blood sugar management and diabetes and things like that. But the thing to know about insulin is it triggers fat storage. So it's also a fat storage hormone, is it moves blood sugar from your bloodstream, causes your body to turn that into fat and then store it, wherever your body is storing fat. And so obviously for weight loss, it's not a hormone that you want large quantities of throughout the day. And so with cortisol causing more insulin to be released, it causes then more fat storage, when for weight loss, I think it's obvious you want to be in fat burning mode to get rid of that fat. The other thing cortisol does is it moves fat from other parts of your belly, or your body rather, to your belly. I said the punchline. And it sets up more cortisol producing factories there. So your belly actually becomes like a machine to make more cortisol, which is just so frustrating. And then lastly, there's so much research to show when people have high levels of cortisol in their body, they're more likely to have strong food cravings. And I think we already talked about how, you're not craving healthy foods, they're for less healthy foods. So that's why when you can target cortisol, that you can actually get your body into fat burning, you can stop those cravings and that emotional eating, and you can start to target more of that belly fat. Does that make sense?
Yes. So Cassie, we have talked about all about cortisol, how it is making our belly store more fat so far. But what is your strategy for weight loss that you help your clients with?
Sure. So the strategy is twofold, maybe more like threefold, in the sense that you need to lower the stress hormone cortisol. That's got to be obvious by now. And there are also research proven tactics that work best for weight loss, the scientific literature. And so those are important to take into account as well, for specifically getting the weight loss results. And then lastly, the piece that I think is, just as important is mindset, and the way that somebody thinks about everything that's going on, weight loss, their body, because I really find that it's the mindset that when the storms of life hit, and cortisol gets raised just normally by something stressful going on, like, I don't know, the coronavirus, when the storms of life hit, if you don't have the right mindset, then you're going to go right back to those old behaviors. So it's important for that mindset to change. So let's talk about, go for it.
Actually, we missed your second point because of the internet. Can you?
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
Yes. So the first point, just to recap, was you have to balance cortisol. The second point was you have to use research proven, scientific research proven weight loss strategies. And then thirdly is the mindset piece. So to balance the cortisol, then I recommend really helping to balance blood sugar. And that should be clear after our discussion of insulin and how that's involved. So if you can balance your blood sugar throughout the day, you will find less cortisol spikes. And one way you can do that is by eating regularly. And I recommend people eat enough when they eat to be able to make it 4 hours between meals. And that's going to put you in, fat burning mode in between those meals, if that makes sense. Rather than, especially if you have it's important to have a balanced meal as well. And when I say balanced, every time you eat, you should be eating protein and healthy fat along with your meal, to help provide optimal blood sugar management. So to balance cortisol with nutrition, it's really about blood sugar management. So that's the cortisol balancing piece. You also need, of course, lifestyle support. So things like good sleep, stress management, and then for emotional eating is learning other ways to cope with your emotions besides food. And, both of those, that list of things I gave you really falls into the weight loss practices and balancing cortisol. Does that make sense before I move on to mindset?
Yeah, it's good.
Great. Yeah. And so then the other piece that like I said, was so important is having the right mindset. So the women I work with tend to be accomplished in so many areas of their life. Maybe they have advanced degrees, maybe they've, climbed the corporate ladder, maybe they have, like spiritual undertakings or giving or, big families. Like these women tend to be so accomplished. They tend to be type A, perfectionists. And really that's how I would have identified myself at the time in life where I really struggled with this. And when you are focused on perfection, you're going to get discouraged every time you try something new. Because the reality is when you are learning something and learning new skills, there's no way you're going to be perfect at it. Like, if you look at it logically, it makes so much sense, right? But yet somehow we expect that we'll be different. And especially if you've been on this weight loss journey for a long time and you've had times in the past where maybe you did have success, you have this kind of lifestyle and routine that you might expect yourself just to be able to go right back to. But that's never the case. Hormones need to be balanced first, and these new mindsets need to be in place before you can be maybe back where you were and then even move beyond. And so the saying that I always say, I need to get like a shirt or a mug that I can hold up for my clients, because I talk to them via video, is progress, not perfection. Because again, if you're so focused on perfection, when you inevitably aren't perfect at whatever you're trying, you're going to give up. You're going to feel like a failure. You're going to mentally beat yourself up. But if you're focused on progress, you'll just try again. You'll keep trying and you'll be able to celebrate those small wins.
So, Cassie, stress is something unavoidable in our lives. Whether we are working or not, even if, the ladies who are staying at home and still they have stress, they have their own story. So how can people make their lives stress-free despite their busy schedule?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think instituting some rhythms into their day and their week to decompress and actually rest is really important. And if you don't feel like you have time to rest, then you need to look again and you need to find the time. Because if you don't rest, eventually, this is going to sound really harsh, but you're eventually going to get a chronic disease and die from it, because that is honestly the outcome if you let your cortisol be too high for too long. And so it's that important. And so some rituals and rhythms that I incorporate in my own life, and I recommend that my clients incorporate in their lives as well, is really prioritizing good sleep and finding a way to get good sleep. sleep is important, and getting to bed on time and getting the 7 to 9 hours. I like to do breathing exercises, just simple in, hold, out kind of breathing exercises. And what those do is they cause your vagal nerve, and you can't even see, but I'm kind of touching the top of my ribs. And when you breathe in and expand your ribs, it stimulates that vagus nerve that runs along the inside of your rib cage, and that is your rest and digest nerve.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you can, honestly, I'm like, whew, that felt really good to take that deep breath. Even if you can get that stimulated, several times a day. I love the Fitbits and the Apple Watches and things like that all have breathing applications on them now that you can do a quick breathing exercise and follow the prompt. And it's so easy and so simple, and yet it actually is going to have results. And if you know that there's something that you struggle with, like you eat too fast and that messes up with your digestion, okay, we'll do it while you eat. Or you have trouble going to the bathroom because you're so stressed. Okay, just do it on the toilet. I mean, it sounds kind of crazy and weird, but that's such a simple way to de-stress, is to breathe.
That's good. So, Cassie, do you think there are some foods that can help reduce cortisol levels that we can incorporate in our diet?
Yeah, in general, making sure that you're getting plenty of leafy greens. So leafy greens are high in specific B vitamins that, when you get really stressed, get depleted in your body. And so getting enough of those B vitamins can help keep your adrenal gland, which is the organ in your body that secretes cortisol, can help keep that healthy. Other things that help keep your adrenal glands healthy are things like vitamin C, which we've talked about. If you've been in the natural circles during the whole pandemic, you might know vitamin C can help boost your immune system. So vitamin C, we think of a lot in things like citrus, oranges and lemons, but it's also in broccoli, red peppers. It's in a variety of vegetables as well. And so in addition to, I mentioned briefly earlier, making sure every time you eat, you have protein and healthy fats for balanced blood sugar, adding in half a plate of vegetables, having fruit as well. Those things are going to make sure that you're getting the variety of nutrients that you need to optimally nourish your body and your adrenal glands and help keep cortisol balanced.
So what are the healthy fats?
Yeah, that's a great question. So healthy fats include nuts and seeds and their oils. So, almonds and walnuts and, Brazil nuts and pumpkin seeds and sunflower seeds. All of those things are great examples of healthy fats. Olives and olive oil, avocado and avocado oil. Those are all really high in mono and polyunsaturated fatty acids. Research shows they're great for heart health. And in terms of balancing your blood sugar, fat slows down your digestion and causes your body to just process food a lot slower, resulting in a much lower amount of insulin that may be needed at any one time. So healthy fats are a fantastic way to keep cortisol low, in addition to proteins. And some of those protein foods have fat in them as well. So protein foods include nuts and seeds. So, you get the double whammy there. Include eggs. Cheese is a type of protein, although I recommend limiting to 1 ounce, which is the size of 2 dice as a portion size, because cheese is high in saturated fat, and research shows that can create plaques inside the body and increased risk for heart disease. Other protein examples, tempeh, tofu, edamame for soy, meat, poultry, all of those things.
So thank you for that information. And What about supplements? I mean, do you think there are certain supplements that can help also with weight loss?
So I use supplements with my clients initially when I start working with them. After assessing and see if they're on any medication, because really, if you're on medication, you need to be really careful about taking supplements, because there can be cross reactions, or it might impact the amount of a medication that your body is receiving. So after analyzing, it's important to think about what kinds of supplements. And generally, herbal adaptogens can be helpful. B vitamins, similar, like I said, the leafy greens, these things you get from food, can sometimes be helpful at the early stages when someone isn't yet feeling the effects of the lifestyle and the nutrition piece. Sometimes some supplements in there can just take the edge off and help someone feel a little better, so that they can start to do these behaviors that they need to do to keep cortisol balanced without the supplements someday. Does that make sense?
Yes. And now the last question I have for you.
Okay.
Actually, I have noted that many women, including me, face weight issues. I don't have weight loss issue, but I have some belly fat, which is very stubborn, particularly after I became mom.
Yes.
So, and muscles are also weak in this region.
Yeah.
So, do you think that decreasing cortisol levels can help such cases also? Or if not, then what else can help such women?
Yeah, so as a dietitian, especially an expert in cortisol, I can speak best to the cortisol, and I do believe it can help. I think that you're right in that there often can be, especially, if things just don't look quite right, there can often be other reasons, like the muscles may not have come back together correctly. And so working with a pelvic therapist can be helpful to make sure that everything is anatomically where it is supposed to be. And the lowering cortisol certainly can help. And in general, in the research, there's not really that many things or much of anything that will target belly fat specifically for weight loss. High intensity interval training has been shown to perhaps help a little bit more than other types of exercise. And that's essentially where you do whatever you're doing. If it's a push-up, if it's a jumping jack, you do it all out, high intensity for a period of time, and then you have some sort of rest period. So say you do 1 minute activity, 20-second rest, something like that. But of course, there's a risk to going all out, and especially if you're not trained. And so that's not something that I necessarily recommend. But I'm sharing that I've seen research related to that around belly fat. The best thing you can do is get other causes ruled out, like, is there a thyroid issue now? Do you need to talk to a pelvic therapist and make sure that, the muscles have properly closed and you aren't struggling with something like diastasis recti? Or, and then once you rule out, then you can really focus on weight loss in general, specifically, targeting cortisol to help get rid of some of that belly fat.
Okay, thank you. I think that's a very good information you have given. Thank you, Cassie, for being the part of the Transformation Immersion series and giving us practical and valuable tips on weight loss. I also appreciate you for giving us the downloadable guide, 11 tips to stop stress eating. Really thankful to the people who are watching us, and I hope that you have learned something of importance today. Do let us know your feedback on today's interview on my Facebook community, Body, Mind and Soul Healing. Join my community where I'm going live every Tuesday at 5 p.m. GST, that is UAE time, giving valuable tips. Stay safe and bye for now.
Thank you.